There is perhaps no worse feeling for a writer than somebody not connecting with your work. And the worst case scenario is somebody not connecting with your work to the point that they don't finish it. This is the dreaded DNF, the bane of every writer's existence. So why do readers do this? What leads them to not finish a novel that they've started? And how can you, the writer, prevent this? Also, why are there peppers here? I wanted to focus on sort of higher level reasons that readers will DNF a novel, but I'll try to provide some concrete examples here as well. If you can think of other reasons, please share them below in the comments. So let's get into it. The first reason that somebody could DNF your novel, your prose is subconsciously annoying them in some way. I've talked before about how good prose is often invisible, and people always misunderstand what I mean when I say that. What I mean by invisible prose is that it's prose that does not create any friction for the reader, that they don't spend any energy engaging with or interpreting or trying to understand the prose. They just get the story out of it without even realizing that they're reading. That's why it's invisible. You can have invisible prose that's actually quite beautiful and interesting and poetic and artistic and all of that, but it's invisible because the reader doesn't have to expend a lot of effort to read it. Some of the things that can turn a reader off are problems with the prose, or they can also be stylistic decisions that you've made that just don't jive with a particular reader. Jive? I personally don't love novels written in present tense. That's a personal preference of mine, and other readers could have their own preferences. But every time I've picked up a novel that's written in present tense, there's this moment of, oh, this is written in present tense. For other readers, this could be first versus third person. It could be how much dialogue your story has. It could be any number of a million different stylistic decisions you make. All of these things are decisions that you have to make as far as the style of your story, but some readers may like those decisions and some readers may not. There could also be problems with the prose. Maybe the sentence structure is choppy. Maybe you've got white room syndrome in a few different rooms. Maybe you aren't attributing dialogue clearly or attributing dialogue clearly. Maybe the flow just doesn't flow. What's important to remember here is that this could be something that the reader doesn't even notice, but it sort of grates on them with every page of the novel. It slowly drags down their opinion of the novel to the point where they don't finish it. Sometimes if the rest of the work is good enough, it will compensate for this, but you can't rely on that. This is why you need to make sure that your prose is as good as you can get it. Next up, reason number 2 someone could DNF your novel: you have not rooted them into it. A surefire way to get somebody rooted into your novel is to bury them up to the knees in dirt. That will prevent them from walking away from your novel. Your reader needs to connect with your novel. They need a rooting interest. This could be a character they like and want to follow. It could be a plot question that they want answered. It could just be a setting or world that they want to explore. Different people will connect or not connect to different elements of the novel, and predicting this is tough because it varies so much from reader to reader. I've read like the first 3 books of the Malazan series. I think it's the first 3. But I took a break from the series partway through the 4th book because that series is so heavily focused on world building, and I'm primarily interested in the characters that were introduced earlier on, and a lot of those books don't return to those characters for whatever reason. It's a well-written series, but when I started the 4th book and it introduced new characters, I was like, okay, this I don't think is for me. And that's a shame because I really like Erikson's writing style, and he's a really good writer, but I just wasn't able to connect with that series. I'll probably give it another try at some point, but I felt last time I went into it that I needed a break. Steven Erikson doesn't need my patronage. He'll be fine without me. But you need to make sure that there is something to connect readers to your novel, because you ain't Steven Erikson. Unless you are, in which case I'm now a little more nervous. You can have massively high stakes in a beautifully crafted world filled with rich and interesting characters, but the reader still may not connect with the story. You need to evaluate why someone would be connected to something in your story. What would draw them in? The place to start here is with you. Really consider what draws you to different elements of your story. Why do you find certain things interesting? Why did you want to write this story in the first place? Why do you like a character? Why do you find a particular aspect of the setting so engaging? The best fiction resonates as strongly with its reader as it does with its author. Success comes when you find something that affects many people the same way it affects you, and when you can articulate that effect in your writing so that people feel the same things you feel. If you yourself don't connect with your novel, or you don't see any reason that you would connect with it, then how can you expect other people to connect with it? Reason number 3 that people may DNF your novel: it doesn't manage expectations. The reader needs to know to one degree or another what they can expect from your novel, and the novel needs to deliver on those expectations in some way. This is especially if you have an unusual element that's introduced earlier on. The reader's mind is going to be aflutter with all kinds of thoughts and predictions and wonderings about what the purpose of this thing that you've introduced could be. Setting these expectations starts from the first line of the story, or even before that. You have to remember that the reader is going to be seeing things about your novel, whether it's reviews or what other people have told them, or even what's on the cover. If you have a dragon on your cover, the reader is going to expect there to be a dragon at some point in the story, or perhaps a badass character who's referred to as the dragon. I've not read the book, but Dan Wells's I Am Not a Serial Killer has one issue with this kind of thing that I've heard of. As a quick aside, if you ask someone if they're a serial killer and they say, I am not a serial killer, that's probably a legitimate answer. If someone abruptly volunteers that information, then that might be a bit of a red flag. How was your weekend, Bob? I am not a serial killer. Okay, cool. What I understand about that book is that there are some supernatural elements involved in the plot that some readers don't expect. And while it was a well-received novel in every single way, some people took issue with this expectation violation, and likely at least some of those folks DNF'd the novel. These expectations come from genre conventions, from other books that readers have read, from stuff they've heard about a novel, and from stuff that's actually in the novel. Whether you intend for them to have expectations or not, the reader is going to create expectations in their mind about things that pique their interest. If you have a sudden revelation later in the book that's not set up properly, it may turn the reader off. You have to give some direction from what they can expect from the story. You don't want to reveal too much, but not having proper expectations in place will sour the reader on the story. DNFing is itself a sign of expectation violation. The reader expected that they would enjoy the novel, and that expectation was violated, so they stopped reading. So it could be argued that every single DNF comes down to a violation of expectations. Speaking of, people are probably wondering about those peppers. Well, pepper yourself to find out. That joke was not as good as I thought it was. I hope that doesn't make people want to stop watching this video. Well, joke's on you, because I'm going to end this video before you can